Welcome to Powered by Her, exploring the stories of how area women power their business. Hear from the growing network of female entrepreneurs of the Upper Cumberland with your host Tiffany Ann Ton, director of Biz Foundry. Powered by Her starts now.
Hi, you're listening to Powered by Her in the Hinson Oakley Podcast Center. I'm Tiffany Anton with Biz Foundry, and I have Tatum Hill Interiors in today. So Tatum Hill with Tatum Hill Interiors. Hi, Tatum.
Hi.
Thank you for coming in.
Happy to be here.
So let's start off with why interiors?
Why interiors? I think I think people who are creative brains are always going to be creative brains, and I have always been. Since I was a little girl, I have always wanted to style things, decorate things, put things together and make them beautiful. And
were you like the kind that had like the bedspread that matched the curtains that matched the lamp?
And love to, since I was little. Love to.
And so you grew up in Livingston?
Yes.
And so I think that interior design decorating is, I'm a northerner, so I think that's a little bit more of a southerner kind of thing.
Okay.
Do you think your mom was like that too?
Yes, she definitely had that. I would definitely say I got those parts of her. She could paint and was a very talented painter. And so I loved to sit with her and watch her do that. And she loved to pull things together like, ooh, we found this treasure. Where can we use this in our house? You know, thrift stores and antique stores, or when we'd go to Dillard's or anywhere, she and I were just always like, ooh, I bet we can make a room out of this. Or she and
so,
I.
And it wasn't like, oh, I just like this piece and it doesn't match anything else. It was like, okay, this piece, and then let's like do the whole thing all around it.
Around it. And that can be anything. And I tell people that all the time. You have to have some sort of jumping off point. That can be anything. It can be a piece of fabric, and that's where we start, and that's what you build on.
And you build that whole thing. So as a girl, as a young girl, did you think that you were gonna be doing interior design work, or what was your dream as little Tatum? What are you gonna be when you grow up? What was the answer?
I always said mommy. Isn't that funny? I did. When I was in kindergarten, they had little bears. Draw what you want to be when you grow up, and I drew a bear holding little bears with a vacuum cleaner and like an apron on. I said, I want to be a mom. That's what I wanted to be. Yeah. And so honestly, as I was growing up, I thought it would be my dream to have my own store. I didn't really know what I wanted it to be, but I was like, I want to own my own something and like be the boss and make it beautiful and make it a place where like when people come in, they're like, oh, I feel good in here. I didn't know what I wanted it to be. And then when I went to college, I went to Carson Newman in Jefferson City, Tennessee, and they had a design program, but it wasn't a wide range of classes that you could take that I felt like would really, really like curate my design talents and abilities. So I kind of went the business route instead, thinking if I do want to own my own business one day, these business classes will always be beneficial.
Of course.
Accounting,
I say that a lot to entrepreneurs is that, you can have your passion, but that doesn't mean that you necessarily know how to run a business.
100%.
And so I think that's really smart in college is like you knew interior design, you have the eye for it, you have the passion for it. But those business classes, I'm sure, have come in pretty handy.
Very handy. And I'm so glad that I went that direction because those are things and tools and classes I use every day in running a business. And I got my minor in marketing, and so loved marketing classes. And marketing is just such a great way to get yourself out there and get your business out there. So
when you left for Carson Newman, did you come back to Cookeville area right away?
No, we lived in Knoxville for a year. Got married right out of college, and we lived in Knoxville for a year. I actually, and I don't know how many people know this, but I went to cosmetology school in Knoxville. So if I'm being like candid here,
it's a safe space.
Yeah. My goal in my head was I kind of have these dreams and aspirations for myself, but I do know that I want to be a mom, and my mom stayed at home. And I thought I would just do that. That was something that felt natural to me. So I kind of based my career on what can I do until I have kids. And so cosmetology was another way to be creative for me. And I knew that I had always, been that friend who did our other friends' hair for prom and things like that. Always enjoyed it. Again, creative and How can I make something?
And design,
new?
I mean, you design hair.
And it really wasn't a lot of like cutting or things. I just like to take it and make it pretty, you know, so.
Which is what you do in people's homes.
Correct.
Exactly, right?
So I had that thought that maybe this is the direction I should go, which felt funny to go 4 years to college and then turn around and go to cosmetology school for 11 months. For me, I remember feeling funny about that. Like, did I waste my degree? And I didn't. I think it was wonderful to do that, and so excited that I went that route, because I did cut hair for 7 years, and it was great. I enjoyed it very, very much.
Were you working for somebody else at that time, or did you have your own place?
No, I was working for somebody else. Well, I rented a chair at the Ritz here in Cookeville.
Which is a little bit of both. You kind of get that entrepreneurship,
ownership.
But then you kind of have a boss that does some marketing help for you and stuff like that. So that's kind of a neat aspect. I just think entrepreneurship can look very different in very different avenues. And
it was a great place for me to start, honestly, in being my own boss, because it wasn't a ton of responsibility, but it was enough for me. We moved back to so I went to school while we were in Knoxville, and then we moved back to Cookeville. I started working at the Ritz, and I worked there for 6 or 7 years and really enjoyed it. And while I was working at the Ritz, it was like still doing that decorating sort of, and it mainly at the time was just decorating. There was no like design behind it. It was just like my friend who had a baby nursery, and I've got these things. What can I do with them? And I'd go in and rummage through their garage, or maybe we can spray paint this, or maybe we can.
So were you just doing this as like a hobby, or were you just consulting? Fun. Were you charging anybody anything? You were
just for free.
Working a lot for free.
Working a whole lot for free, yeah. And I remember like trying to figure out how to sew one day. Like I was like, I borrowed a sewing machine, and I tried to figure out how to sew drapes for somebody that I think still has them, that I gave them to them. And I'm like, oh gosh, I should go back all these years later and like fix that, because it wasn't great.
What do you think makes you, puts that drive in you to just figure it out? Where does that come from?
I don't know. I do think, I've got 2 younger sisters, all 3 raised by the same parents and raised the exact same way. And we are all 3 so different. So like the things that like drive us forward and things, are they're just so different, and, being raised exactly the same. So I think some things are, you're born with certain drives, and for sure, 100%, I believe that the Lord gives you talents and gifts, and it's up to us to figure out how to use those, how to use those talents and gifts also to bring glory. And so sometimes I do struggle with like, am I being super materialistic and like caring about material things that don't really matter? But in the same breath, I have found a lot of joy in my job, because I love to be at home. I enjoy feeling safe in the space that I live in. And ultimately, that is what I want people to feel. I want them to be able to walk into their house and be like, oh, I'm so glad that I live here, or it feels like me.
Well, and part of being able to utilize your talents to the best of your ability is just being in a great space overall. So if your home is not the space that you want it to be, you can't really tap into your true potential, because you're living in, so much of your day to day is what you surround yourself with, whether it's the media that you look at or just your home and the way, I know when my house is picked up and well kept, I just feel a little more pep.
Feels good. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you really, kind of can tap. So yes, I can see where it can feel materialistic at some points, but then you realize, okay, well, I'm helping these people kind of tap into their resources. And
yes. Yeah. And I love it, because it's like everybody's so different. So it's kind of figuring out who you are and what you like and what's important to you. And so, I try things out on myself and my sisters all the time. I'll go over to their houses and say like, I've had a stressful day. And they'll be like, do you want to decorate my Christmas tree? Or do you want to move somebody's room around? And I'll go in there and just start moving stuff around. Or like, I brought some, stickable wallpaper. I'm going to put it up in here. And they just let me try whatever. So that's kind of fun too. So a lot of things that I do in people's homes, I've already tried on my own. So when people are like, ooh, I'm scared of this, does that really look good? And I'm like, oh yeah, I've tried it before. Or like I tried it and it wasn't good. And so
let's go back into a little bit. So you're doing hair, and you thought, I'm going to do this until I stay at home and have kids. And most of our listeners are women. A fairly large amount are mothers. And I have been so inspired by how women can do it both. They can really make motherhood work. They can really make building a career work. And so tell me about why you decided to, you have fairly young kids still, and you've built, how long ago did you step out and start Tatum Hill Interiors?
Let's see, 6 years ago, I would say that I went full time into it. I was at that time pregnant with my daughter, and my son was 4, and I was still cutting hair, and I was cutting hair. I had backed off to like 2 or 3 days a week, but those 2 or 3 days a week were like 8 to 8. I mean, they were like, all in doing it. And so it was hard on my body and being pregnant. And then I would also at that point had kind of gotten busy. I had gotten my first client. Someone had called and had gone to a friend's house that I had done her nursery and said, how much do you charge to come out to someone's house?
You're like, I don't even know.
You know what I did? I said, oh, you know what? I'm in a bad spot. Let me call you right back. And I hung up and I called my dad. I said, someone wants to know how I charge. What do I say? And he said, well, do you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, 100%. Well, then we should sit down. So I sat down with my husband. He was like, let's figure out what this would look like for you. How does this make sense? And then there were 2 people in the Sparta area who had been designers for a long, long time that I respected and loved being around. And I went and just with a notepad and questions, what would you do differently if you could do something differently in starting your career? And what do you think, what are things that I need to know being the age that I am and, learning and trying to step out on my own? And so that was so helpful.
So were there those mentors for you? And I think this is so awesome about this community is that usually it's not your competition. I'm not going to help you. Were they pretty open to?
They were so great.
And why do you think that is?
They were older than me quite a bit, and I think they were just thinking like, if I was your age in my 20s and starting again, these are things that I wish I would have done. Yeah. So there was no like, it was almost like passing the torch, sort of
a way to pour into
Absolutely.
You, and you always feel better when you're helping others, and it was a way for them to pour into you, and hopefully
and still do. I mean, there's one lady, she's so dear to me, and she still does that. I mean, it's a lot of like coming alongside her and bringing me into certain jobs, because I know at some point when she's finished, it's like she helped me along the way, or like given me an opportunity to kind of come in and it's been a great relationship, and she's been so sweet in doing that for me. And that was, I do tell young girls who are like, how do you start a career, like interns that I get from tech, they're like, how do you step out on your own? Because, in Cookeville, we're not, super big city, Nashville and small town. So it was one of those things that I was like, how do I do this? Like in my town where there aren't lots and lots of designers and things. So how can I be different? How can I be
and teach people what interior design is?
Absolutely.
That's I'm sure something that you've had to go through. In case you're just joining us, we're listening to Powered by Her in the Hinson Oakley Podcast Center. We have Tatum Hill Interiors in Tatum Hill with Tatum Hill Interiors. So back to the question about motherhood. So you didn't stop cutting hair when you had your son in the first place.
No.
And so what was that decision like?
So I continued to cut hair after he was born. A lot of juggling. It was a lot of like,
why not just walk away from it?
I don't know. That's what was so, I guess that was funny, is like, I thought I would. And then I enjoyed working. I think I'm a better mother because I work.
Yes.
I am 100%. And it's just funny that I always thought that's what I wanted to do. But
do you think that that was supposed to be what you were supposed to want to do, is to be a stay-at-home, like
for sure.
The societal pressures of just like that's what a good mother looks like.
That's what I thought. And I do struggle with that. I mean, I do struggle with that some. Every once in a while we'll have this big talk, my husband and I, and I'll say, am I a bad mom because I work? Because I work a lot and because I enjoy it. And he's like, no, not at all. It's so good for your kids to see you do this.
I think we forget as mothers, we forget sometimes that just us living our lives is an example for our kids.
Absolutely.
And we think we have to be directly pouring into them instead of just standing tall and standing proud and living our lives to the best of our ability and the God-given talents that we have. I think we forget that's important too.
So important.
I think that staying at home is a wonderful thing for the people that works for, and it doesn't, but that's not everyone.
And
we have to forgive ourselves.
Yes. Absolutely. I'm so happy I get to do both. And I think the balance for me is like when I'm home, I try to be home. That's the balance and also the struggle because, with our phones these days, your work is just right there in your pocket all the time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of learning to like turn it off. And when I'm at home, be at home. And then when I'm at work, be at work.
Well, and I think that's kind of the beauty of entrepreneurship as well, is that when you are the boss, you're the founder of Tatum Hill Interiors, your name's on the building, you get to choose, okay, well, this school field trip is really important.
Right.
So I'm going to choose to set that aside and I'm going to choose to go there. Where when you're working for the man or the woman,
that's right.
You don't always get to do that. And so that's kind of the beauty of feeling like you really get to fulfill your desires as a mother, but then your desires as to build a career as well.
My favorite thing that I do, I volunteer in the art department at my kids' school. So it's once a month and I do art class with them and it, a creative brain, it fuels, I love being in there. I'm like, what are we doing today? Oh, I'm so excited that we're painting shapes or whatever that we're doing. And it's fun because I love that. And my kids know that and they both love it. They love to be creative, paint things. It's just always been something that's in our home, and my youngest always says, why are you changing things again? And I'll say, I'm just making them better. Just making them better and more fun.
So you're pregnant with your daughter, your second child, and you decide, okay, somebody's going to actually pay me money to come do this. And so you started Tatum Hill Interiors. And when you first started, when I first knew of you, you were kind of sharing a space with HomeCore downtown Cookeville. And then it just felt like suddenly you exploded and you got your own space and then you bought your own building and, things in the past 5 years, I feel like have just exploded for you. Yeah. Tell me about that.
So it was a jump. It was a jump for me. My husband kept saying, you're going to have to choose. You cannot do both. You're like really stretching yourself too thin to be this person, and mom. You can't do all three. You should choose. And I was so grateful that he said choose because I just felt like I couldn't let something stable go for something that I didn't know if it would work out.
It is scary to start your dream, right?
So scary because you just don't know.
Right.
And so it's funny. I've moved. This will be my third move on the same street in like 5 years or 6 years.
It's a good street, right?
We just carry our stuff down those streets. It's so fun. But it was just like I rented half a space, and I started there and I still tried to like only work 3 days a week or only be in the store 3 days a week and be home 2 days a week. And I'd bring my kids. I remember doing emails and like rocking the car seat with my foot, and so I really tried to do it all the things, and it really stretched me thin and made me stressful. So it was like, we need to sit down and figure out a strategy. Do you want to work and how much do you want to work? And if you do, let's figure out some childcare and things like that. And so once we did, it was still never in my mind to hire an employee. I don't know. That's another step you should take in your business. But I was like, oh, an employee, what does that look like? And what does that mean for me? And so I hired my first employee in 2016. And
were you in your own space?
I was in my own space. Yes. No, I had my own space. I was like, we got to be open. You got to be open at least 5 days a week. So I'm going to have somebody be in here. I can't be here. They were both one was in school and one was still at home. And so I was like, I know I'm going to have to, I can only be in here a certain amount of time. So I hired my first employee and we learned together. She would ask me questions. Sometimes I'd be like, I don't know. I'm going to have to figure that one out.
Let me call my dad.
Exactly. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So we always laugh. She's like, that's okay. We'll figure it out. So a lot of growing in the last 3.5 years. I mean, a lot. And a lot of leaps of faith.
Well, and when you first started by renting a little bit of space at the HomeCore building, again, like I kind of touched on a little bit, you're still teaching people in rural Tennessee what interior design is.
Yes. And that's a lot. And, what's funny is I think I was learning myself. I knew what it looked like. in big cities, but I was like, what does it look like here? Like, can just anybody hire a designer? I wanted that to be true. I wanted it to be like, it can be for anybody. And so I had to figure that out myself too. And like going to trade shows and going and sitting under other designers and listening to them talk. I've learned a lot of what I want to be and what I don't want to be. But it is educating folks about what I do. And so I think once I figured it out myself, like, this is who I want to be, because I was trying to be a bunch of different things for a bunch of different people. And now I think,
and like you said, it's going to look different in Cookeville than it does in Nashville.
100%.
So you go to a trade show and it's like, well, I can't put, that in somebody's house. Like that's not what we do in Cookeville.
Yep. And it's helped me to be able to, educate people and say, this is kind of what this looks like. Do you think you want this process? And 9 times out of 10, they're like, yes, just didn't know what you did. So yes, I want that. And, still learning a lot of different things, but definitely in the last 3 years, I've learned more than I have, in the last 10. So, it's fun. It's fun to grow. It's scary to grow, but it's more fun than it is scary.
So then you decided to buy a building. You're renting a space, and then you decided, okay, we're here. We're doing this. We're going to buy this building, and it's going to be ours. So how does that feel to be a building owner?
It feels good. I mean, right now it feels good because we're about a month out from maybe moving in, and it's been a long road, but it's been a long road in that, you buy a building and then you're like, okay, I bought this building, but now I have to renovate this building. And what do I want that to look like? And how does this function the best for us and what we're doing? And I'm so glad I didn't try to do something like that 5 years ago, because I wouldn't have been ready and I wouldn't have known how we needed to function. And so, waiting that many years to pull the trigger on something like this helped me feel more confident and like, this is what I want to be, and this is how it can function more. And our needs, our need for storage and our need for a design area where I can pull all the samples down together to show someone, that was important to me too. And so I felt like I knew better what we wanted because we waited a while. Because
you didn't really know when you opened the first building. I mean, even when you rented the space, just what it was going to look like on your day-to-day schedule, or what people were going to do when they came in and all that kind of stuff. So you've been able to kind of design this building. So are you going to have a grand opening? And
I hope to. We will open, and then I'll probably wait till I feel like it feels like I want it to before we do a grand opening. But I would love to. And just being in the historic part of Cookeville, that's so fun for me. And I've been on the street for so long now, and I've watched so many things change and watched people come in, and I love this area of Cookeville. I mean, I love it. I love seeing people walk up and down, and we started putting dog bowls out, like of water and stuff in the summer. And I love, people would poke their heads in and say, thank you so much for having some water out for me.
My office is right across from the gentleman's barber. And I love watching, I know who all gets their hair cut there, and when they, come out and all that kind of stuff. And I just love the foot traffic from my office window.
Me too. It feels so good.
Yeah, watching all that. So as women, I think sometimes we try to really stand up tall and put on this, we're strong. Nothing. So tell me about a time where you didn't feel so strong, and maybe you thought, this is not. Maybe I need to cut and run.
I laughed because I had an intern and with me one time, and then the girl that I had employed, and we'd been in business for a year, and I was really starting to feel like this is in the new space. So a few years ago, I was thinking, I'm feeling really good about this. I think I figured it out. And it was like, 2 days later, kind of got knocked on my feet, and I walked in and said, raise your hand if you hate your job. And I raised my hand, and they both were like, are you okay? I was like, oh, yeah. I think it's just like the first time that I felt like I had good success in presenting, had a very trusting client who was like, go for it, fully trust you. And it was pretty easy. I felt like she and I were both on the same page the whole time. And I was like, yes, finally, this is how the process is going to work from here on out. And then the very next client, no way. It was like the hardest. I mean, it was the hardest thing. And I felt like it ended in like, I don't think we're the right fit. Like, I don't think that this is going to work. And I did not love that. I do not love conflict. And I do not love, I used to say, I want to do things that make people happy when they leave. So whatever that is in my job, I want to do something that makes people happy. You can't do that all the time. It doesn't matter what job you have.
Right.
You cannot please people all the time. And I've realized how to handle conflict, how to handle uncomfortable situations.
How do you get to the point of knowing, okay, it's time to say this is not a relationship that's going to work. This is, we're not the right people for each other. I know as women too, it's hard to say this isn't right when that's money walking out the door. Sure. And who knows where where that's going to spill over into. Absolutely. Or who that, so how do you find that strength to pull into yourself and say, okay, I'm okay with letting this walk away?
I think it was weighing the options of, for a long time, I was so scared to let anything go. And so I definitely did a lot of things on the front end that I feel like cut my legs out from under me, or I sold myself short, where I didn't believe in myself enough. And I was constantly like, well, yeah, don't worry about that. Or I felt like I was just allowing myself to be taken advantage of.
And when you start off with working for free, volunteering with, you start off with friends and family. And so, that's always a fine line when you're like, oh, do I charge you? Do I not charge you? But then you start undermining your worth.
You do.
Because you're like, well, I've done these 10 projects for free for people because I was related to them, or, I needed to get something to show my talents. Can I really charge X amount of dollars? Right. Am I really worth X amount of dollars? And so how do you,
and that's hard, because sometimes I don't, in my mind, I'll say, I'll have to tell myself, I am worth that. I do work hard. Because sometimes every once in a while that creeps in, and somebody will make you feel like you're not worth that, or like your time isn't worth anything. And that's what a designer is. It's our time that people don't see, where I'm a night owl. So sometimes I will stay up until midnight looking at a lamp, or at flooring, or I'll wake up and think, oh, did I take that measurement right? And that's the first thing I do in the morning, is like run out to somebody's house and measure something, just to triple check that I got that right. And so it's not wrong on installation day. And I think, I just don't know if people understand that, like, that it's just a lot of time. It's a lot of time to make sure that things are right. And, when things maybe they look easy from the outside, like, well, anybody could have done that or whatever. They don't really realize the time that was put into it on the front end.
Especially in, you see the end result, and it's this beautiful space, beautiful room. Everything's real put together, and it's like, oh, well, it's pretty. So pretty seems like it, but then when you think of, people putting makeup on a person, it's like, well, that can be a large transformation.
Absolutely.
And it's the same kind of thing. It's like, that's a lot of, every little detail and blending everything correct in the makeup sense, blending everything correctly, but that goes into a home as well.
100%. And, so it's something that looks beautiful. You take one picture and it's like, oh my goodness, wow, that was so pretty. And it's like, but 6 months before, we were still really in the thick of it. It did not look like that.
Well, and like you said, you always have one anchor of something, and whether your anchor is a lamp or a whole couch,
exactly,
you still kind of work your magic around whether one thing that it is, and kind of put that all together.
And sometimes it feels easy to do, and sometimes it feels hard to do. When you're working within a budget, which I love to do. I love when people give me a budget. I like to make things fit and work inside that.
Is it like more of a mission for you?
It is. Feels more like a challenge. It's like, okay, I have to make all these things fit inside this. And I want to say in the end, yep, stayed within your budget. Because for a lot of men, they love that. That's, sometimes getting, a female on board, easy to do. Getting a man on board with what I'm doing, sometimes they're like, wait, I don't understand. Now, why is that sofa so much? Or whatever. Right. Why is that? Yeah. Why do these drapes cost so much? But when you can explain that the whole process works together, and I can break it down of like, you said to spend this much, and I did. They're usually super happy.
Yeah.
And I gave you a special place to sit, you know, and they're like, oh, well, that's great.
Yeah.
So just making all those things work, or like you feel like you've gotten it together, but I've got, this one last thing to find, and I only have X amount of dollars to do it in. That might take me 4 hours to find that one item, you know? And so it usually all works out in the end.
If you had to give one piece of advice to female entrepreneurs out there, what would your one piece of advice be?
Oh, man. My one piece of advice, goodness, I don't want to say something cheesy like believe in yourself, but I really do, like, know your self-worth, you know, just tell yourself you're worth something and that you can do it. And so, and challenge yourself and do things that make you uncomfortable. You know, I think that's the thing for me, is doing things that make me feel uncomfortable also make me feel empowered, you know? And then I'm like, I did that. Sometimes I'll go home and say, guess what I did today? Had an uncomfortable conversation, and guess what? It was great in the end. I mean, it like turned out great. Now everybody's on the same page. We're all moving forward, but I usually avoid that, you know, with every fiber of my being. I'm like, I'm not going to have that uncomfortable situation, because it challenges me to get outside of my box. And yeah, take some risks.
Yeah, I think that's a big, I mean, that fear of like, oh, I can't do that. I'm not good enough. Is especially in women, is very, very right there. Just those negative voices. Yeah. So, how can people find Tatum Hill Interiors aside from Broad Street?
Aside from Broad Street, I have a website, tatumhill.com. I just spent some time, with someone who's really, really good at that, and really tried to make my website look like me and how important that is.
The branding of everything. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I'm trying to be better at marketing because I just, again, put yourself out there. You know, every time I put something out there, I'm like, oh, is it good enough?
Yeah. Are people going to tear it apart?
Absolutely.
So if people were interested in using your services, do you do consultations and they can schedule that with you? And
I love to do in-store consultations first. We just sit down, and that's like no charge to come in and sit down and for us to talk about how this process works and what they're looking for. I just like to meet people in kind of like a neutral location because when they come into the store, they can at least see what I'm all about as soon as they come in. You know, my store smells a certain way because we burn a certain candle, and, you know, it's all about the feel. We play certain music because we want it to feel a certain way when you come in. And so when you're kind of in that space, I think it's like, oh, okay. They either like that vibe or they don't like that vibe. And so I like to meet there first. I want them to meet me. I want them to want to work with me as much as I want to work with them. So I love to do in-store consultations first, and then we move from there.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. So Facebook, Instagram,
website,
tatumhill.com. And they can look you up. And thank you for coming in today.
Thank you so much.
You listened to Powered by Her in the Hints and Oakley Podcast Center.
You've been listening to Powered by Her. Download your favorites and keep up with new episodes in the Hints and Oakley Podcast Center.